Hey everyone, welcome to the Eat to Win show where sports nutrition meets peak performance. Get ready for expert insights, real stories, and tips to help you win with every meal. Let's dive in.
All right, and welcome to the Eat to Win podcast. I'm Samuel Blord, and we're here to talk about all things sports nutrition and how we can help athletes win. Whether you're an athlete passionate about nutrition or a registered dietitian, this is the place to be. Today, we're thrilled to have an amazing guest with us. Her name is Krista, a registered dietitian nutritionist who's going to be breaking down sports nutrition and endurance athlete nutrition, as well as fueling female athletes from pregnancy to post-pregnancy. Let's jump right in. Thank you, Krista, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So if you could have a dinner date with any athlete, past or present, who would it be and why?
Two athletes come to mind. One, and they're both triathletes because that's kind of endurance sports is the main world that I'm in. And so one would be Rennie or Miranda Caffrey, and the other would be Kat Matthews. So I don't know how familiar you are with triathlon and the endurance world in that aspect, but Rennie is an amazing triathlete. She's now retired, but she had a very successful career. She and I think one of the main reasons why I think it would be really cool to sit down and talk with her is because she and I were pregnant around the same time. And I've seen her in person once and was not brave enough to go interrupt her in her business. And so I haven't actually ever got to meet her, but it would be really cool because it just sounds like our journey of pregnancy was very similar, and kind of seeing her journey on social media was really fun. And then Kat Matthews, she's also an amazing athlete. She was hit by a car on her bike, and she shared her journey coming back from that. And she's ended up becoming a very dominant female triathlete as well. So just kind of hearing from her and getting to sit down and just get to know both of them would be very enlightening and encouraging. And so yeah, those two women are pretty amazing athletes and would be fun to sit down and have dinner with.
Absolutely. So I do admit I'm not that familiar with the world of triathletes. So what were kind of their accomplishments like in the triathlete world?
Sure. So Rennie won Kona, and so she basically won the Ironman race that every triathlete longs to win. And Kat Matthews she's won at all different levels and just continues. It's not only like both of them, it's not only just their winnings and their results, but just their ability to just keep going. And Rennie was known as not a very strong swimmer, and that's kind of where I'm at. She and I are similar in that too. Like swimming is not her specialty, but she was able to swim and then just start picking people off on the bike and the run. Kat Matthews is a very well-rounded triathlete, and she just is continuing to dominate at different levels. And I've actually gotten to see her race at Ironman Texas, which was really cool too. So yes, Kat Matthews is still racing professionally. So who knows where she'll go.
Okay. Yeah, that is something really interesting about that sport is you could have different areas that you're good at and not good at. That's not something I'd really considered before, being like not a strong swimmer or being oh, swimming's really my thing. It's the bike that always gets me. This sounds very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, obviously Rennie was a professional, so she was strong, but it wasn't like her strongest area.
Yeah, for sure. You definitely outswim me. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And then, so you said she got hit by a car while she was on her bike. Like, so was this during a race or was she training?
She was training, I believe. She was training.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. And so what was that recovery like? Like, how quickly was she able to get back into?
So months, like probably, I don't know the exact time frame, but she went through some really severe, just broken bones and recovery, and basically the thought of like, you're never going to race again, you're never going to compete, like everything's completely changed. And now like she's been able to show, no, with dedication and focus and hard work, like I'm not going to give up the sport that I love, and so.
Sounds like a very inspirational story.
Yeah, you should watch your video sometime.
Okay. So moving on to something about you personally. So those are two people you'd be interested in meeting with because they both sound pretty inspirational. Was there a specific experience that changed how you approached when you work with these endurance athletes? Because you're a dietitian and that's kind of your area, it's your specialty is working with these endurance athletes. Is it just triathletes specifically, or if someone was like a cross country runner, do you also work with them?
Yes. So honestly, I work with any kind of athlete. I've worked with MMA fighters, I've worked with bodybuilders, and then to the other spectrum of endurance athletes. So marathon runners, ultra marathon runners. So kind of a broad spectrum. I would say the majority of athletes that I see though are endurance athletes. And so, when I first got into working with athletes, I've always been active and loved running, but I wouldn't say I was an endurance athlete. So as I began to train for longer events myself, that was kind of a good eye-opening experience, because you learn a lot in school, you learn a lot listening to other educated people, right? And you obviously can't have everybody's experience, but if you can go out there and you can challenge yourself and do some more endurance sports, really doing it yourself and experiencing that kind of opens up your eyes to areas that might cause problems during a race, or, just that experience really opens up your eyes to what works, what doesn't work. And working with athletes too, something that I didn't really expect was how much athletes struggle with just having a good relationship with food, like, and so with athletes, like we always strive to be faster and stronger, whether that's like landing on the podium or hitting other certain PRs or gaining, like having a higher FTP. Like we're always looking to get stronger, right? That's one of the reasons we do it. We love being active, but the other reason is we want to get stronger and faster. Who doesn't like to be fast, right? So there's certain sports that some athletes tend to focus a lot on weight or body composition or physique. And with that, comes a lot of focus on food and weight loss, or, so just that relationship with food is very gray for some athletes because of the pressure that they have or have put on themselves to reach a certain physique or weight to be successful, so like those are two areas I would say, like it didn't really, I didn't understand until I was kind of in the profession and in the endurance world myself, and then working with so many athletes who just do not have like a healthy relationship with food,
Okay. So can you just describe like kind of practically how that relationship with food, like what were the first things that you noticed that kind of caused your antenna to go up, so to say, of like, there's a relationship with food issue here?
If an athlete is reporting like being scared of eating certain things, or like I really restrict and I only eat like healthy or clean or simple, like, if they start eliminating certain food groups, or if they are really scared of eating certain food groups because they're worried about it changing things for them, it's when there's fear, it's fear driven rather than my body needs these certain fuels to perform, and learning to be able to, function that way. So I would say red flags if an athlete came in would be them reporting like, I only eat healthy things, I don't eat sweets ever, very like black and white, like restrictive type vocabulary.
Okay. That makes sense. And so explain, especially so for me and the listeners, I never ran cross country or kind of like that long endurance. So what is the appeal that they're thinking of being lighter and smaller? Like, help explain someone who has never been in that world, like why they might think that would be an advantage, or at what point it stops being a disadvantage, and
Yeah, sure. So something to think about is, in the world of runners, you don't typically, just like as an outside person, you don't look at people in the Olympics or high school even and go, wow, they're really fast. And you can tell probably aren't as lean as they could be, right? Like the actual physique of a runner, most likely is going to be leaner, lankier, longer, right?
For sure. Yeah.
And so there's a lot of misconception on what the right physique would look like for a runner, and that's kind of an area where our world is changing a little bit, is like understanding that there isn't, like, triathletes, a great example. If you look at people competing in the sport of triathlon, and even at the professional level, they do not all look the same. Like, their body shapes and physiques are different. And so with a runner or even a cyclist, the more weight you carry, the harder it is going to be on your body. As a runner, all the pounding, it's going to be harder on your knees and your hips and your joints. It's going to be harder to run up the hill fast. So typically you want to be lighter and leaner, and that usually means, you're a faster runner. Not always. There's kind of a breaking point. Same thing for cyclists. There's a lot of focus on your watts or your watts per kilogram. And so, like, usually the mindset is, the lighter I am, the easier it is for me to get up the hills, right? Like, I'm a better climber. But there's a point of diminishing returns. Like, you get to a particular point where you're not eating or fueling well enough, and you're restricting too much to try to excel at your sport. And then you're asking your body to continue to compete at a high level, and you're not fueling your body at that high level. And so then you get injured, or you're getting sick, or you're not actually being able to hit your numbers or your watts, or things are getting a lot harder than they should be, or you're getting emotional and snappy and irritable. Like, your body sends signals. We just don't always listen to them, because it's like, no, like, I have to drop weight to get to this whatever number that we have in our minds that is where we need to be to compete. And, like, sometimes that's not an appropriate place for us to be. So
that's so interesting to me, because I grew up wrestling, and I work with a lot of wrestlers. And so the overlap that you just described there, it's like, yep, I have heard that before.
Yeah. Well, that too, right? Like, in that sport, you have to make weight, right? And so, like, if you think back, you probably could pinpoint certain individuals that you competed against that you were like, man, like, just conversations that you probably heard, like, wow, that was like a really disordered conversation around food, like, that obviously was not a good place to be. And so when you come out of that world, then trying to, like, retrain your mind to accept food and to fuel appropriately, like, it's such a battle, so it's not only like food and decisions, but it's also like this mental battle that you're having to fight because you've been in this one mindset for so long,
Yeah, absolutely. I like what you said earlier about when it becomes a place of fear and you're afraid of the food. Yeah, that's definitely, I like to anchor it back to, like, how do we get our nutrition to match our goals? So, like, how do we use nutrition? It's a tool. It's not, I don't know, it almost becomes kind of like a moral thing of a good and a bad food. Like, there's good and bad foods, and we're afraid of bad foods. So I like that. That's a new way for me to think about it, at least.
Yeah. Well, and then your comment too, like, then you have to go back to the athlete, and because sometimes they'll push back and go, no, like, I want to drop weight. And as a dietitian, you go, like, I see your performance and it's starting to, like, not go the way you want it to. But sometimes that athlete, like, they are so driven to this one goal that you have to step back and go, okay, like, my job's to educate you and to direct you and to lead you, but you're the one that has to make those decisions. And sometimes if they are in a more disordered mindset, they don't hear that, right? And so, like, certain things have to happen before they realize, like, I really am not going in the right direction, So it's kind of, that's where nutrition gets really interesting. Like, it's not black and white, and
Definitely not, yeah.
Like, is the athlete willing to hear you and go, okay, like, maybe weight loss isn't my goal anymore because my performance is starting to suffer. I need to learn how to train differently. And, I am lean, I am healthy, I am strong. Like, so, shifting that mindset away from, well, this weight is no longer appropriate for me. There was actually a cyclist in the Tour de France this year that competed at a lot lighter weight. I don't remember the numbers, but he was actually trying to drop weight, and he noticed, like, his performance is not improving. So he was actually willing to go back up higher and ended up doing a phenomenal job because like, he wasn't so focused and driven on cutting weight to be a better cyclist. Like, he was able to see the shift, so that's like a good success story.
Okay. And I pardon my ignorance, but so do they actually, there's weight classes in that, or they're just trying to go lighter because of just the way they perform? Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
or their job, like their role on the team, like,
Mm-hmm.
depending on what their role is for the tour, are they like trying to just continually like make it like go out and put out hard efforts and like pull people, burn some matches basically, or is their job to be a good climber, or is their job to be a
I see.
sprinter, so depending on what your role is as like on the team may alter your goals for your weight goals, or like are you trying to drop weight, or that kind of thing.
Okay, so that makes sense. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting to me, the overlap between wrestlers and endurance athletes. If lighter is better, because
Mhm.
there's definitely, there's always some examples I always try to point to when I'm talking to a client. But yeah, there's definitely been that idea that lighter is better. If I just went down to another weight class, I would
Mhm.
suddenly be standing on top of the podium. And it's a trap.
Yeah.
Okay, so we kind of talked about that being a misconception. Are there any other like big misconceptions you see when you are working with endurance athletes?
I think that I think pros to an extent, but I think that like age groupers, that would be kind of like a term that I would use, age groupers. So basically all of us who like to race or compete and we aren't getting paid to do it, So age groupers, we sometimes see these amazing athletes or professionals and we hear what they're doing nutritionally and
Mm-hmm.
think like, well, I need to do that. Like that's the key to success, and sometimes some of the things they're doing is great. Like I think we can learn a lot from listening to other athletes, and sometimes like that isn't going to be beneficial at all. So I think that the misconception of I need to fuel like this person because it's working for them, or another misconception might be like not altering your fueling based on the environment of your race, or the intensity of your race. So just, I don't know if it's a misconception or more so just like an education or unknowing
Mm-hmm.
approach, of like, well, this works for this, so I'm going to do it for this. And then you blow
Mm-hmm.
up and like it doesn't work
Yeah.
out.
Okay. So, well, what would be like a practical example of that with like cyclists or I guess any
Sure,
endurance athlete?
sure. For a while, there was kind of a focus on going more fat adaptation for some endurance athletes. And I'm not saying like that's not an option or it won't work or like you shouldn't do it or shouldn't try it. That was like a bandwagon or a train that people were jumping onto, and without really knowing how or what to do, or like how to use that appropriate type of fueling. And
Mm-hmm.
so then they ended up not being successful and having issues, right? And rather than like, if that is something that you're wanting to go more towards, then there's a way that you do it correctly. And so it's kind of like this big hype, right? Like it sounds like everyone's doing it and it's being
Mm-hmm.
successful, and why not do it? Well, for some athletes, it's been super helpful in their particular sport and area.
Mm-hmm.
But for others, like for instance, if you're a sprint triathlete, you don't need to be focusing on fat adaptation
Yeah.
because you are racing at a very high level of intensity, right? Where like
Yeah.
fat usage is not the primary fuel source. So
Mm-hmm.
that would be a practical example.
Okay. Yeah. As far as the fat adapted, I feel like the strongest argument against it I've heard is that even with endurance athletes, there's still always that big push at the end. And if you don't have enough carbs, you're gonna that last push at the end, that who wins the race is kind of gonna suffer. Do you think that's accurate? Do you agree with that, or do you feel like that's like too simplistic?
No, I agree with that for sure. I don't have an issue with, so bottom line is if you're an endurance athlete, you're going to burn through fat stores. Like you're going to use fat as a fuel source because you're out
Absolutely.
there for so long.
Yeah.
So like we're all to an extent fat adapted. And then towards the end of the race, yes, like you definitely should have carbohydrates on board if you want to have any kind of spark, towards the end, or any kind of push. Your body is like craving that. Think of like a sprinter versus like cross country 3 mile runner. Like even the 3 mile runner at the pace that they run, they're not going to do much fat for fuel at all, probably, like
That's actually
it's all
incredible.
carbs.
Not an endurance runner. The fact that they just basically sprint the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
woo, I'd be sucking if I tried that.
Yeah.
Or was the Olympics, that runner that the US runner that I forgot what event it was. I want to say it was the 800 meters where he set a world record and he just sprinted for like, because I think it was the lead runner, instead of doing what they typically did, which is kind of set a pace, the lead runner was just like, I'm going to push the pace the whole time. And then he gassed out during like the last quarter of the lap. Did you see that?
No, I didn't. Man.
I was trying to keep up with a lot of the Olympic events, but that one,
Mhm.
everyone was there. I saw clips of it everywhere online. People like, look, this is crazy.
Wow.
But yeah, he clearly had those carb stores for that last quarter, because he had basically kept it. Like, I think the lowest he had gotten to was like 8th place, and he got up to 3rd place. And then during the like last quarter, he just booked it and was able to pass the guy who had been leading the entire time. At every point, the announcers kept on saying, "Yep, they're at world record pace. Yep, they're at world record pace," because apparently he had just, I'm gonna sprint the whole time. So I was like, wow, it's very dramatic. I'm sure as a non-runner, I didn't fully understand all the ins and outs of their strategy there, but it was very engaging to watch for sure.
He definitely was fueled by carbs
Yep.
all the way.
Yes. All right. So just kind of a question about general themes. If you could change one thing about how your field operates in sports nutrition, what would it be?
I think that a lot of dietitians come at athletes or their approach working with individuals through what they've learned through the book rather than experience. And I think that a lot of dietitians also come at it as like there's only one way, that like there's no other options, there's no other way, and they're just very closed-minded. And so, when an athlete comes to me and they say, this is something that I'm interested in trying, I never say like, no, that's not, like, that's a horrible idea, right? Like, even if in my mind I'm going, I wouldn't recommend that. If it's something that an athlete has decided that they want to try, normally we need to try it. First, I will educate them on like kind of pros, cons. Let's talk about this. Why are we wanting to do this? So investigate. Even if it's like a supplement, right? Like, should I start taking this? And my comeback is usually, well, what are you hoping to get out of it? Like why? Why would you start consuming this? Or why would you shift your intake this way? Or what's the why? And then we'll investigate a little bit further. And my job, I view it, is to educate them on like, okay, if this is your goal and this is the route that we're going to take, here's some areas that might be a problem. Here's some areas that would probably be helpful or successful. And then let's try it, right? Like, what do we have to lose? Now, if it's like they race in a week, then no, probably not, not if this is your A race and you want to make these big changes, probably not the best option. But if they still choose it, they still choose it, right? And like,
yeah, for sure.
It's their choice. So I think that as dietitians, and in the sports realm, there's so much noise that we hear, the athletes hear. There's so many recommendations. There's, fear tactics that are thrown out at athletes. There's like, this will make you, 5,000 times faster, so like you hear so much stuff or you read so much stuff. And I think that as a dietitian, we have to hear it and then process it, rather than like hear it and go, oh no, that would never work. That's a horrible idea. There's so much research that says that's not acceptable. Like, at the end of the day, everybody's different. Everybody's unique. Yes, there are some like typical things that, like carbohydrates, they're burned a lot faster, right? Like we know that. Fats, they take a little longer to break down and use as energy. So like there's some black and white there, but like really just kind of being open to hearing what your athlete's coming to you with. And that's what they're looking for you to, respond with, is like, this is what could be helpful. This is what might not be helpful. And then let's see what happens, and if it doesn't work, we'll change it, because nutrition is for your life. Like, it's a lifelong journey, it's not just like seasonal. So.
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense. Yeah. When you said that, I almost wish that part of my nutrition education had been like, part of the internships was like, go around and join the team for a week. like for example, like run, like at least try to keep up with the cross country team, or see what their schedule is for a week, or join the football players for a week, or join the baseball team. Cause I feel like that would give you a lot more practical when you're working with that specific sport to be able to see the ins and outs instead of just trying to, obviously we have like the baseline, like physiological understanding of nutrition, and that obviously is going to underpin a lot of what we're saying, but there's for sure, because of the logistical challenges that oftentimes athletes face when it comes to sports, that is a big aspect. I feel like being able to actually experience those sports would make a big difference.
Yeah, or their schedule, right? Like, okay, so you wake up at what time, and like then you get your training, and then you go to class, or then you go to work. Like, just kind of being in their shoes, like you said, for a week would be great, because it would open up your eyes, because you can read, right? We're educated,
Mm-hmm.
but it's very different. It's like when I was educated in sports nutrition, but until I became an endurance athlete, that's very different,
Yeah.
like completely different world. So,
Mm-hmm.
and helpful to be able to apply it. So, yeah, I agree with you 100%.
Liquid Fuel is a new sports and hydration product formulated by a sports dietitian to give athletes the edge to train and compete longer. It contains the low glycemic carbohydrate palinitose, designed to keep blood sugar levels more stable and to provide energy for 3 to 4 hours without the blood sugar crash seen in other leading sports drinks. Its unique 4-part electrolyte formula includes 50% of your daily magnesium to optimize muscle function. Liquid Fuel is naturally sweetened along with no artificial ingredients or colors. Currently being used by high school, collegiate, and professional teams, Liquid Fuel allows you to live your life with the confidence knowing that you're properly fueling your body. Visit drinkliquidfuel.com and use the code MSD10 to get 10% off your order.
So a question. So when we were talking about supplements a little bit, what supplements do you think are good for endurance athletes, and what supplements do you think should be avoided?
Oh, that's a loaded question. So
Yeah,
that gets into some gray area here. Okay.
for sure. Yeah.
So one thing I would say is, when it comes to supplements, obviously it has to be NSF safe, or like it has to be safe for the athlete to take, and it has to have a seal of approval, because otherwise you could get into some trouble. Even if you unknowingly take something, if you weren't taking it for any kind of advantage, there's always a risk. So I think that that's like, if an athlete that, whether you're a professional athlete or just an athlete trying to like get faster and better and stronger, I think that's something that you need to be aware of. And if you're a newcomer, or you're looking at becoming professional in your sport and you aren't aware of that, I feel like a lot of athletes come from high school or college and they kind of get thrown into the world of professional racing, and they don't always think about like, oh, well, what about my multivitamin? Is there something in it? Like, well,
Yeah,
hopefully not, but it just opening up their eyes to that.
absolutely. I've seen some creative multivitamins. It's like, yeah, that has vitamins and minerals. It has a lot of other things that are not vitamins and minerals in there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And more than likely, like it was a flashy product. It was guaranteed to be beneficial. Like, they created some really good buy-in and belief. And so then that's why the athlete ended up purchasing it, right? But they have no idea what is in it or why they're even taking it. It just sounded really, really good.
Good.
Like,
It's good.
I have
Yeah.
to take this.
Yeah.
So that's like the ground rules. The next thing I would say is, if an athlete's wanting to take some sort of like supplement, and it has like vitamins and minerals in it, or like vitamin D or calcium, just like kind of the basics,
Mm-hmm.
I would recommend an athlete getting their blood checked, just to have blood work as a baseline to know if they're depleted in certain things, or if they aren't, like, because I view a multivitamin as insurance. Basically, like, if you want to take it, fine. If you're eating a well-balanced, varied intake, you probably don't need it, but as long as it's safe for you to take, it's probably not going to hurt you. You're just going to pee
Yeah.
out whatever you don't need in a perfect world, right? And like, it is what it is. So some people, some athletes I have that I work with, feel much more comfortable and confident taking something, some sort of a multi or a powdered supplement with vitamins, minerals, things like that in it, that antioxidants, stuff that they have researched, we've researched, it's safe to take, there's no harm. So if there's a deficiency, then we dive into that, right? Because then that athlete could be impacted, whether they're an elite athlete or an age group or just an active person, like that could impact their performance and recovery and sleep and all of those things. Then from there, then we're stepping into a little bit more of a dicey world, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So I would say a lot of athletes tend to be lower on protein intake than what they need. And even the RDA is super low, in my opinion. And I look at that as like minimum needs, 0.8 grams, minimum needs. And the research for athletes is showing that they need a bit more. And depending on your goals and what they're trying to achieve and what their life is like, are they professional and like this is what they do? Or do they have a job and kids and like they're balancing everything? Like, depending on their situation, I may recommend a certain protein supplement to help them boost their protein intake.
Absolutely.
Just out of like convenience and not having to think quite as much and simplicity.
Absolutely.
So
kind of understanding that logistics side of the sport. It's like they're super busy. It's protein shakes are amazing because it's one of the few proteins that you don't have to refrigerate or cook before you can eat it. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I would say that is probably I'll stay kind of safe on that comment. Like that is one of the most frequent supplements that I would recommend for an athlete to take.
For sure.
And then from there, like you can dive into the weeds regarding supplements.
Okay. So one specific supplement. So I know for runners, there can be a specific kind of anemia. So do you often see people who are iron deficient?
Yes. And normally it's more, which logically makes sense. Usually it's the female runners. And you don't have to miss your menstrual cycle to be anemic. Like it's common. Like if you've lost your menstrual cycle, you're typically anemic. And so, yes, that would definitely be something to look into and important. Like not having your menstrual cycle is not normal. Well, let me rephrase that. It is normal. It is not good for you. So very normal to lose your menstrual cycle as an endurance athlete, a runner, a cyclist, like high intensity duration type of training or just high level sport. Very common, very normal. Normal doesn't always mean healthy. And in that situation, it doesn't.
Sure.
So iron is definitely going to play a role for your performance, your recovery, your health. So
absolutely. Okay. So where do you think, so if you could guess in about 10 years, where do you see advancements in kind of sports nutrition going? Where do you see, what do you think the hot topic areas of research will, how athletes kind of apply it? Like, where do you think we're going, especially in the endurance realm?
So I think that there's been a lot of talk and realization of a lot of research has been done on males and not a lot of research has been done with female athletes. And, there's a lot of talk of why, and to put all of that aside, basically we know that there hasn't been a ton of research with just women athletes. So I think that is something that is currently advancing and will be interesting to see in 10, 15, 20 years, like how much information we have out there. Some of the interesting information is kind of looking at like how much carbohydrate can females utilize per hour in a particular type of activity, intensity, duration. How much do hormones play a role with performance? And there's some information about how as our hormones shift, we're more prone to getting injured because of ligaments, tendons, things kind of getting more flexible. And so is there a reason and a purpose? Like, do we shift our training around our cycle? But then there's the opposite argument of, well, what if you have to race and you're on your cycle and you haven't trained hard or you haven't so just there's a lot of factors that go into that. And I don't think that there's a right or a wrong answer. I think that every female has the responsibility to learn her body and to learn like what signals is your body sending you, to learn your cycle. And when you feel really, really tired and like probably today's not the best day to do a really, really hard effort. Like, or if I try, just understanding and giving yourself the flexibility and allowance of grace. Like, this isn't going to be a great workout session. I'm going to do what I can. I'm going to feel like my legs are bricks, and that's okay. Like, I'm just going to do the best I can. So I think that that's going to be a really cool area of just like, where can we go with this education and information for female athletes? And, one of the complications is when you throw female athletes into research, what kind of contraceptives are they on? Are they on a contraceptive? Because that all changes your hormone cycle too. So, or your hormone levels. So like that's some of the complication, right? The researchers are kind of hitting. And so it may be 10 years before we have a lot of helpful information, because like just the difficulty it takes to get females around the same time frame or like same levels, So that is where I'm most excited to see, like, how should we shift our recommendations based on that in the future?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm for it, time, I'm very sensitive to the how difficult it is to apply time sensitive nutrition as well. Because like it's one thing, like for example, when I'm working with wrestlers, it's very easy to like, we're going to talk about recovery nutrition and we're going to talk about what you should do after every single workout. But then that additional complicated of like, okay, you got the monthly cycle and then we've got our workout schedule and then we're going to try to layer on what I should be eating depending on when I am in the month. Like that logistically is very challenging. So like I'm imagining just trying to, like, cause like with my most of my time sensitive nutrition I'm talking about is how do we make weight? Cause we got to like do everything. Like what are we doing right before we make weight? What are we doing right after we make weight? So there's like that additional layer is one of the things that make wrestling so difficult, or wrestling nutrition so difficult, is like having to be a certain way at a certain time and then recovering. But even that's more predictable than a monthly cycle. And so trying to fuel with that's definitely, I can appreciate how complicated and difficult that can be to try to line up your diet and training schedule to match that. So, but I definitely like what you're saying is those numbers. I think because like athletes definitely have that mindset of like, I got to push myself. I want to be on top of the podium. I want this to be a good practice. But if to be able to actually have numbers where you can actually no, the research says this, so it's okay if this is the way the workout goes out today. I think that, like you said, being able to give yourself grace, I think that's definitely going to be a powerful outcome because of that. Because it's not just you making it up. It's not just you like not being mentally, tough. It's so this is actually physiologically what's happening in my body, so it's okay. So you can actually,
because you can have great sleep, you can have great fueling, you can go into a workout mentally ready, and then you just, from experience, I can admit, like, then you just get on the bike, for instance, and you hit a wall. It's like, what is going on? Everything was like great leading up to this, and I feel like garbage, And so then, it's just okay, like this is the way it is going to be today, and then that's okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. That's it. Definitely. It's kind of one of those areas where I guess nutrition starts touching a little bit of the psychological side of things of what do we actually know in the physiology. It's always helpful to understand what's actually going on in the body, because definitely can give us more educated guesses as why things are happening. But yeah, I definitely think that'll be very interesting 10 years from now, seeing where that research goes. Do you think there's anything really like practically in the research that like right now we know it's a good thing to do during certain times? Or is it right now we're still in the very early stages where we don't really have specific takeaways that we should be doing?
I think it depends on what researcher you listen to and what key people in the world of nutrition research and female athletes you dive into. I feel like to an extent the opinions are a little bit split on like if it makes an impact, if it doesn't. So there's some thoughts that we need more carbohydrates. There are some thoughts that we need less carbohydrates. There are some thoughts it doesn't, like, so I think it boils down to, again, listening to your body, testing things out. If you are focused on getting faster and stronger, whether you're at an elite level or not, most athletes are type A and very in tune with their bodies and how they feel. And so I think that's kind of the first line of defense for most females is like, one, are you having a regular cycle? If you aren't, that's where you need to start. Two, start tracking it. Like start writing in your either a journal or in your training peaks or whatever you're doing your training on. And definitely if you have a coach, communicate with them. Like, I'm 3 days out from my cycle. Like you'll have to make note, right, when you actually hit your cycle. But like today was really rough. Don't know why, and then look for those trends or like, I was really tired today. Like, okay, well, do you need to take an iron supplement? Because honestly, there are some females that are not anemic, don't have low iron, but because of their energy and just excessive fatigue around their cycle, we go ahead and do an iron supplement during their cycle because they know they're not deficient, but during that time frame, if you're not deficient, you don't want to be just taking iron all the time. So that, like, just kind of putting that out there for listeners. But if you are on your cycle and you experience excessive fatigue, you may consider trying an iron supplement around your cycle time. And that may help you improve your energy for that period of time. Then once you're done with your cycle, you stop taking the iron supplement because you're not deficient and you're not needing to boost those numbers. So I think that's another thing, kind of being aware of them and just trying and testing to see, like, does it impact you and can it help you?
Yeah, I love that answer because that's absolutely true. Is a lot of times we'll see research like for example, caffeine, where it's like we now know that there's 3 different phenotypes of caffeine. So when we were seeing those researchers of caffeine does certain effects in like power athletes, for example, it was actually turned out that the signal was strong enough that it overcame the fact that there were 3 phenotypes, and 2 of the phenotypes really didn't benefit from the caffeine. But that one phenotype really, they could handle caffeine really well. The fact that the idea of an N of 1 sample where you are like, so it doesn't really matter if 80% of the athletes benefit from the supplement. Whenever you take it, it is just absolutely awful. So I like that idea of being able to see your own signals of like what actually works for you. Because at the end of the day, that's what really matters, is when you're working with that one athlete, what is actually works for you. Because it doesn't really matter if 90% of the people it helps if it doesn't help you, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that idea of personalized nutrition is very valuable.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move on to, so we actually kind of talked a little bit about it, but the debate around carbohydrates in endurance athletes. Simply put, carbohydrates are important. Do you feel like there's any other things you want to hit on that, or we feel like you kind of already covered that?
I mean, I think the only thing I would add is the amount of carbohydrates change. So for endurance athletes, like, you know, you're going to have some training or races that are higher intensity level, other times where you're doing more zone 2, you know, lower intensity range of training. And then the duration of your training will impact the amount of carbohydrates that you need. Your weight can impact how much carbohydrates you need, because you think of like a 6'5" dude will probably utilize way more carbohydrates per hour than a 4'2" female, you know, like just body mass. So there's ranges of recommendations per type of training, duration of training. And then again, it goes back to just within that range, where do you feel most fueled? Where do you feel strongest? Where do you feel, you know, you perform the best? And that takes just trial and error. So yes, I'm a big proponent of carbohydrate intake. And you could even break that down into like, do you use sports nutrition? Do you use whole foods? Like where can you use either one of those options in the form of carbohydrate? So, I mean, yeah, we could go deeper, but that's kind of like the gist of it. You know, yes, carbohydrates are your main primary source of energy for fast, high intensity types of training.
For sure. Absolutely. Okay. So kind of a hypothetical question for you. If you could collaborate with anyone in the field of sports nutrition, past or present, who would it be and why?
This is a really interesting question, because like, man. So right now, I can answer the question for like right now in this moment of my life. There's a man named Lane Norton. He looks at a lot of research, and he's been on a ton of podcasts. He has a YouTube channel, and he basically takes research and breaks it down and simplifies it and doesn't feed you any craziness. He just states what the research shows. And so I think if I had to pick one person, it would be him, only because he's done so much reading and so much investigation into research around sports, but just in general research in nutrition, that he would be really interesting to sit down and have a conversation with and just hear kind of his take on certain things and pick his brain, because it's like he's a walking researcher, you know, like just full of information. So I would say Lane Norton.
Okay, cool. All right, and another hypothetical. If you had to start over in a completely different career, what would it be?
I would say a traveling journalist, but there's a caveat. If I didn't have a family, like,
Yeah,
because, that I think would be super cool to travel around the world, write about these amazing experiences. But since I have a family, that would kind of be sad, and I'd
yeah.
never, unless I could take them with me.
There you go. There you go.
So maybe a professional cyclist. That'd be pretty cool. Or a professional triathlete.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be cool. But then
Okay.
I'd have to be good enough. So
Yeah.
there's caveat there too.
For sure. Okay, so a little bit of rapid fire questions for you. So
Okay.
just kind of like 1 or 2 word answers for you. All right. So coffee or tea?
Coffee.
All right. Morning person or night owl?
Both.
Both. Interesting.
Both. That's the
So does that
problem.
just mean you don't get a lot of sleep, or
I think most parents don't get a lot of sleep. So yes,
that's fair. That's fair. Favorite post-race treat?
a milkshake.
Okay. Okay. And then what's the best advice you've ever received about sports nutrition?
Everyone is different.
Okay. And then one thing people don't know about you.
I would like to go skydiving someday.
All right. Skydiving.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something I've done. I don't know if I ever want. What is it? What is it about skydiving that it's like one of your future things you want to do?
I've always loved roller coasters. And so
Okay.
I think that, and I always have loved riding in an airplane. I know a lot of people hate going flying and just all the stuff that goes along with that, but I actually really love being in an airplane. Just the different views, seeing the world from a different perspective, just kind of being interested in what's going on. The world still moves, and keeps moving, even if you're up high in the sky. And so I think just the thrill, like, most of us are adrenaline junkies, right? If you're like I don't want to say most of us. Some of us are adrenaline junkies. My husband would be like, no, he will only go if I go, maybe. But I don't know. I think it'd be really cool, really fun.
Fair enough. Yeah, I guess I could see the appeal of having to overcome your fear to actually jump out of a plane. But I actually have friends who have done it, and they've said, like, basically once you're getting up there, they're like, we're going to push you out of this plane. We know you're scared. We know you logically came up here because you wanted to jump out of the plane. We're going to get you out of this plane.
Yep. So here we go.
So, yeah. Because that kind of sounds like almost once you leave the ground, you're going to be falling out of a plane.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about it too, like, as an athlete, we do a lot of things that are scary, right? Like, or intimidating, or if you want to get better and faster and stronger, you have to stretch yourself, and you have to push yourself, and you have to do things that aren't comfortable. So maybe that's partially like some of the appeal is, the interest of doing something that's a little scary and a little intimidating, because then you could grow. I don't know.
For sure.
Maybe.
Absolutely. Okay. And final couple questions for you. So what is a book or resource that you recommend when someone is wanting to learn more about sports nutrition, endurance nutrition, that kind of area?
Yeah, this is kind of a hard question, only because there's so much stuff out there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So like if somebody's looking for a particular database that's reliable, you could look at the Sports and Human Performance Nutrition Database. And this isn't like super exciting, but like research articles, like if you actually read them and like make sure that they're kind of an accumulation of information rather than just one article. But then you have to be able to read research and like kind of dive into that. So I know not everybody would be interested in that. Reliable podcasts, like there is so much information out there. Again, I think you just have to be careful with when you hear a podcast, ask the whys, or like dive into that a little bit more. Don't just like listen and believe. Like you need to listen and like assess with an analytical mind if it seems like kind of this crazy concept. So yeah, I would always say it needs to be something reliable. The Eat to Win podcast, right?
There you go. There you go.
Obviously, great place to be. You know what's going to be put out there is like legit information. So yeah, those would be my recommendations.
And so if you could say one final statement about all that we've talked about today regarding sports nutrition, just kind of a takeaway for our audience, what you want them to walk away from this having learned.
I would say that just remember everybody's different and unique, and don't be afraid to try out different strategies. You know, it's your fueling strategy. So think about it, try it. You know, honestly, some of the people that are listening and so many of the athletes I've worked with, when I ask them like, so what is your fueling strategy? Or like, what are your fueling goals? They have none. Like they haven't really even contemplated, well, I didn't know I needed X amount per hour. You know, I didn't know that I needed to replace with electrolytes or caffeine. Like just, I mean, that's where they're coming from, right? Like they don't know that there are certain recommendations. And so that's why we're working together. And so having a fueling strategy, that's huge. That's important. You spend a lot of time training, right? Like you spend a lot of time weightlifting or running or cycling or swimming or whatever your sport is. But how much time do you actually invest focusing on your fueling? And not only just for training and competing, but also your daily intake. Because what I find is a lot of people get so busy and they're in such a fast-paced life that they don't plan out their meals. They don't have a plan for dinner. They don't, like, that's the last thing on their mind. Or they don't eat breakfast because they don't have anything prepared and they're running late. And so then they just keep moving on. And so like actually having the fortitude to sit down and have a plan for your daily intake and make sure your daily needs are met will lay the foundation for you then to perform at the next level or a higher level or recover better, because your daily intake is where it needs to be supportive for then your performance. So I think that's like that in a nutshell would be you're unique. Make sure that you have your foundational nutrition, your daily needs met, and that it's balanced and varied, and then focus on your training fuel and your performance fuel so that then you can get the most out of that.
Awesome. I love that. Okay. And so if our audience wants to get in touch with you, how do they reach out to you?
You can email me at Krista@fuelfearlessly.com. I have a Instagram and a Facebook, #fuelfearlessly, or I have a website and it's fuelfearlessly.com. So if that doesn't ring a bell, Fuel Fearlessly, like that's my goal for anybody that I work with, right? Like learning to be able to handle food and manage food, whether it's for performance or just a healthy relationship with your food.
Awesome. I love that. All right. Well, that's it for today's episode of the E2Win podcast. Big thanks to Krista for joining us and sharing her experience. If you found today's insights valuable, feel free to like, subscribe, and share your experience with our community. Also, if you do us a big favor to rate and review us. Until next time, keep winning.
Thanks for joining us on the E2Win Show. Remember, every meal is a step toward victory. Until next time, stay strong and keep winning.